Good afternoon and welcome to the Labor Day edition of the Harvard Business Review podcast. I'm your host, Christopher Scully, and we have a real treat for you today. Our segment is being taped at Fido Irish Pub in Atlanta, Georgia, and we'd like to thank the owner, Kieran McGill, for sponsoring this episode along with Gunpowder Irish Gin. I lost my mojo a second ago because Walking on Sunshine was playing, followed by Come On Eileen, but I've been able to recompose myself, so let's get back to it. Okay. Today's topic is a review of Michael Lewis's runaway bestseller, Stickball, Finding the Gems in Today's Murky Talent Pool. In Lewis's follow-up to the critically acclaimed book Moneyball, Stickball chronicles the rags to riches story of Dan Sikanovich, the math prodigy turned project manager for Sevenson Environmental Services. Stickball takes you behind the curtain to show you how a construction outfit in upstate New York was able to identify top-level talent and catapult to the top of its industry. This evolution is best exhibited in the story of Dan Sikanovich, a.k.a. Stick, and his lifelong friend Alan Elia. Together, in the most unlikely turn of events, they created an undeniable culture of success. Michael Lewis takes a deep dive into the innovative recruitment practices of Sevenson that helped take them from $250 million in revenue to $1 billion in a relatively short time. Stickball takes the reader into the trenches to profile their most valuable manager, Stick. The secret sauce can be found by studying Alan Elia, the forward-thinking executive behind their stratospheric growth. Sevenson is a multi-generational environmental services company that has exhibited year-over-year growth only seen during the tech bubble. In the mid-90s, Mr. Elia decided that to attain the heights he envisioned, Sevenson must disrupt the talent recruitment process. Elia rose to stardom after a brilliant 4-year stint as a physics major at Wake Forest, outclassing many on the same track. He easily grasped the most intricate concepts and was the envy of even the Asian and Indian students. It was at Wake where he met Stick, another superstar in the adjoining math department. What red-blooded American majors in physics or math, for crying out loud? Anyway, fate would have it that they would reconnect years later and crush the paradigms that so often plague corporate America. Back to talent recruitment. Mr. Elia and his team developed an algorithm for scoring a candidate's likelihood of success. While MIT and Harvard scholars have been unable to decipher this code, Elia's company continues to dazzle analysts. Elia attributes much of this success to their ability to find and retain amazing talent. That's where Mr. Sikanovich enters the picture. Stick was identified as target number one, and once he was added to the staff, he rose the ranks, much to the chagrin of those Fortune 500 companies that missed on Sikanovich. Caterpillar, Bank of America, and Union Pacific all failed to give Stick a first interview. As far as Elia and Sevenson is concerned, the rest is history. As the book cover illustrates, Stick exhibited a passion for service. It shows him cutting grass at Wake in 1985 as a thank you for providing such an amazing education. This commitment to service was recognized early by fellow student Alan Elia, the future CEO of Sevenson. This image of Stick perfectly striping the grass on the world-renowned quad at Wake Forest would have made even George Toma proud, and it left a Sharpie-like imprint on Elia's brain. Elia thought, how could we bring that level of commitment and precision to our teams at Sevenson? As Elia took the reins of Sevenson in the 90s, he wanted to disrupt the old patterns of talent acquisition, so he reached out to Stick. Although they had known each other for years, he had to avoid the nepotism pitfalls that come with corporate governance, so he requested references. Stick left his mark in every decade of his life, so gathering a handful of reference letters was a simple task. Mr. Elia was particularly impressed with two of the letters, those of Mr. John Hesford and Mr. William Blair. We will have the authors read these letters later, and you'll find them truly enlightening. Elia's ability to garner the necessary nuggets from reference letters demonstrates his innate ability to recognize special talent. Much in the same way Bobby Beathard scouted talent for the Dolphins and the Redskins, Mr. Elia has shown a real knack for finding superstars. Dr. Seth Gartenlaub, renowned psychiatrist at Cal Berkeley, said the following: Mr. Elia has a very unique ability to understand the contours of complex personalities and how they'll translate to work performance. A 2023 report by consulting powerhouse McKinsey & Company, hired by Elia to help optimize company performance for the coming fiscal year, uncovered the true impact of Stick on the organization. In summary, he not only had immense influence on his direct reports, he had a global influence on company culture. Stick was the keynote speaker at the private holiday party, An Evening with Al, where attendees were wowed by Stick's command of the stage and the ease with which he connected with the audience. In my interview with Michael Lewis and others who were in attendance, the operable word was charisma to describe what they witnessed. Elia should be credited with commissioning Stick to travel the country, putting his thumbprint on each job site and its team. Elia calls it the Stick coaching tree, and it's been a formula for growth and performance for almost 2 decades. While Ilya is coy about it all, he does credit Stick with upending the old ways of doing things and bringing a fresh perspective to the teams. This is as close as we'll get to sharing a brain with Mr. Ilya. Stick continues his passion for service even today. He is a frequent speaker at Niagara University, where he lectures graduate students on the perils of following a blueprint in your life. He continues to be in high demand and will offer a fresh fall curriculum on the pros and cons of kissing your boss's ass. As I said before, in Lewis's analysis of all things Stick, he credits Ilya's intensive study of reference letters and the meaning behind the words. Ilya clearly has a sixth sense when it comes to identifying talent. Let's hear the authors read a couple of those reference letters now. First, you'll hear Mr. John Hesford, followed by Mr. William Blair. Mr. Ilya was particularly keen on these letters in his hiring decision.
To whom it may concern, it is with utmost enthusiasm that I write this letter on behalf of Dan Sakanovich. Dan is a complex person with many facets to his character. An artist would likely call him a study in contrast. In less generous circles, he might be referred to as retarded. Indeed, his life is best described as a cross between the movie Tommy Boy and The Exorcist. Pleasantly amusing, provided you can avoid gouging out your own eyes from the sheer terror. Dan would be a perfect complement to any office that suffers low morale. Dispirited colleagues of all kinds are sure to find his whimsical nature and carefree attitude towards deadlines thoroughly infectious, like Ebola. He truly brightens the entire work environment. Indeed, Dan has often reminded me that it's hard to call something work when you can do it with an icy cold 12-pack in your lap. At the same time, Dan is a dedicated professional who will rely on his impeccable judgment to know when it's time to knuckle down. Occasionally, after getting his knuckles down, he will likewise put his knees, chest, and face down, wherever he may find himself. But who doesn't value an employee that's willing to work himself to exhaustion? Dan has the unique capacity to endear himself to almost any group of individuals within an organization, regardless of rank or station, as your liability attorneys will certainly come to find out. In fact, the ancillary benefits to Dan's employment are sure to be widespread, from corporate legal to HR counseling services to the IT security division. The entire firm will soon need to be elevating its level of play. Many promising young employees arrive at a corporation ready to make a name for themselves, and then quickly fade into oblivion. I have no doubt that within weeks of his placement, the name Sakanovich will be repeated, usually in hushed tones, in every corridor. From the CEO himself down to the lowliest female intern who mistakenly peeks around the corner of a certain cubicle at the worst possible moment during someone's private time, Dan will leave an indelible and perhaps unrecoverable impression. I'd like to end this recommendation letter by offering a syllogism that might convey my thoughts better than mere words. To wit, Dan is to company as Razorblade is to puppy. Please give that some thought and imagine the possibilities. I may be reached through a third-party intermediary or an unregistered P.O. box in the Cayman Islands if you require further information. Sincerely, J.P. Hesford.
To whom it may concern, I'm writing this letter on behalf of Daniel Sakanovich to verify his unparalleled tomfoolery and nearly criminal tendencies. Dan had no peers, human or animal, when it came to exhibiting chicanery, buffoonery, and unpredictable jackassedness throughout his lengthy college career as my oft-inebriated fraternity brother at Wake Forest University, where he is no longer welcome. As a pledge under his direct supervision for an entire semester, and then as a brother and witness to his complete lack of consideration for others throughout 5+ subsequent years of occasional enrollment at the institution, I can attest to the fact that Dan was a highly dysfunctional alcoholic, a truly dangerous sexual assailant, and a frustrated virgin who was willing to work whatever hours were necessary to get back to a chick's room for a little unwelcome leg-humping session with a plus-size co-ed most often, or a diseased town resident. Most impressive was his unrivaled ability to consume near poisonous levels of harmful intoxicants on a Monday night or in the middle of any given day, which he will certainly bring to your organization as a significant liability. During the 5+ years that he occasionally studied and constantly guzzled lukewarm keg beer in Winston-Salem, Dan became an integral member of the fraternity that we counted on for daily verbal and physical abuse, food stealing, material destruction, and semi-naked courtyard wrestling exhibitions when necessary. Dan was never afraid to waken semi-clothed on a cold vinyl couch in a puddle of his own bile or in a bed soiled with his own urine. Dan's highly delusional manner also enabled him to routinely interface with the other less hated members of our fraternity on an almost childish, semi-retarded level through a frequent demonstration of violent conflict resolution skills and self-abuse tendencies that often resulted in dental fractures and deep skull lacerations. In addition to the aforementioned, Dan was always willing to learn new tasks, such as semi-conscious public masturbation, getting hit by cars, and he was always eager to take on additional responsibilities without hesitation, which is why he was designated the official fraternity ass clown, as selected by a panel of his superiors, of which there were many. I'm confident that if given the opportunity for employment with your organization, that Dan would quickly become a true nightmare of a liability, causing potential physical and emotional harm to your employees and family members. May God help you. Sincerely, Will Blair, former fraternity pledge under Mr. Daniel Sakanovich.
Stickball can be found on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble. If you have a company and are having trouble finding the right talent, this is a must read. Thanks for joining us today for the Harvard Business Review Press Podcast.